Are you ready to unlock your potential? Ready to leverage your life experience? Primed for reinvention? Welcome to Keys to Change with Shelly Henderson, your roadmap to a fulfilling second act in the world of real estate.
My guest today is Ashley Wilson. Ashley is a powerhouse in the real estate industry with an impressive portfolio that includes co-founding Conference Connect, founding Bar Down Investments, LLC, and authoring the best-selling book, The Only Woman in the Room. As a seasoned female investor involved in over $165 million in transactions and managing more than $13 million in construction across 1,500 units, Ashley brings a wealth of experience and insights to the podcast. Ashley, welcome to my show. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelly.
I just couldn't wait to talk to you. And, social media is a beautiful thing in connecting people and bringing people together. And we might not have met and been able to have this opportunity had there not been, social media and me finding you. So thank you so much for being willing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I couldn't agree with you more.
I just find it so inspiring to talk to people with real life stories on how they have brought their own keys to change in the real estate world and beyond, because that's what we are called to do, to help one another and empower people with our own expertise. And you have so many keys to change for the real estate world. And what an impressive portfolio and resume and all the things. So we're just going to get right to it. I've got to know first and foremost, what has inspired you to be in real estate? Because as I like to say, we're not selling anything sexy, like these influencers or whatever. It just, real estate is what it is, but it's a wonderful tool to create wealth no matter what age you are. So what inspired you to start it?
When I started dating my now husband, I was working in pharma. I worked in clinical research and development. And my husband, he's an ex-professional athlete. And I know this is starting to sound like, well, we had all this money, but you actually don't need any money to invest in real estate. So that's not where I'm
Thank you.
going with the story.
Yes,
But
thank you. I
he
love it.
he was looking into different avenues to invest. He wasn't, a firm believer in the stock market. He thought it was very speculative. And he stumbled upon Bigger Pockets and started diving into the community, listening to their podcast. And it coincided with the time that we started dating. So he introduced it to me. Um, and Rich Dad Poor Dad, which once you drink that Kool-Aid, you're hooked. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a book by Robert Kiyosaki that I highly advise everyone to read, and I think it should be mandatory reading in school, to be honest with you. But anyway, that is kind of how I dipped my toes in the swimming pool, so to speak, and learned about real estate. And I was hooked. I decided to do it instead of investing in the stock market. And I did it alongside of my career. So that's how I started. I had a W-2. We bought a house. We house hacked, which essentially means that you live in one space and then rent out other spaces in that same either individual unit, or you can, let's say, for example, if you owned a fourplex, you could live in one unit and rent out the other 3 units. But it's to offset your expenses and potentially even make income over and above your expenses. And then we did that during his season where he was playing, and then to his teammates. And then in the off season, we actually we short-term rented the property. So we Airbnb'd it, so to speak. And that's how we first got started in real estate.
And what time frame was this? How many years ago?
So we started learning about real estate in 2007, but we didn't make an offer on a property until the end of 2008, and then we closed in the beginning of 2009.
Well, and that's very important because you capitalized on a down market, which my husband and I say that the biggest mistake we made is we didn't buy more real estate during that time. We actually bought the house that we live in now in 2011 and capitalized on the down market and probably wouldn't have been able to afford that house had there not been a real estate market crash. So we were able to capitalize on that. Your story is so similar to mine in that my husband and I started our journey a little bit. It sounds like you worked a lot smarter. We worked a lot harder because um, it was prior to that, about 10 years before that, that you got started. We started as investors, so to speak. My husband had his real estate license as a hobby, trying to find my right words. And he was buying kind of, not so desirable properties in the Charlotte area and bought a few of those. And then um, bought a house that after we got married, we actually moved into and renovated that. Um, and joke that now we can't afford to move back because the area has just taken off. So, the moral of that story is you don't buy the best house on the street or the best house in the area because it appreciates. But with that said, it sounds so easy. People say, oh, it's so easy and I don't have enough time. I don't have enough resources. And you, right out the get go, said, you know, something so important. And you don't have to have a lot of money to buy real estate. You don't. And how many people have said to you, I know they said to me, well, I don't have enough money. Yes, you do. I'm at a season in my life where I have friends or people that I know who have children that are coming out of college and they have jobs. And they say, well, my child will never be able to buy a house. It's so not true. I have a 29-year-old son that has purchased his second home and he's renting out his first one and now he's bought a second home. He doesn't make a ton of money. I know that because he works for us and we don't we didn't help him buy either house. So I know that it can be done, but there has to be a little bit of the want to and the willpower, so to speak. And it sounds like you and your husband were willing to put in the hard work and sacrifice what needed to be done. So is there anything that you feel like you missed out or you gave up to start this investment career?
Oh yeah, there's a ton. Before I answer that, I would just like to piggyback on what you're saying with respect to not having enough money. It's not even having enough money. You actually don't need any money to buy real estate. You can what's called seller finance an asset and then make on the arbitrage, which is essentially, let's say, for example, you purchase a house and the seller is offering 5% interest on the note. They're acting as the bank, so to speak. You could potentially be making more in renting out that asset to cover the mortgage that it's never any money out of pocket. And you could take a hard money loan, you could partner with someone who has liquidity. I mean, there's so many different creative strategies that ha- in all honesty, having money is, in my opinion, almost a deficit. It was a deficit in our case because when we started flipping, we thought the scale of our business was contingent upon how much money we had. We didn't actually start bringing in investors until we switched over to commercial real estate. So that was actually a deficit for us. And it's not saying that we had all this money when we were flipping houses. It was just we only scaled to the money we were willing to put in. We didn't bring in other investors. We didn't do seller financing, and that was definitely a mistake, in my opinion. And it also didn't unlock a skill set in terms of how to raise money from private investors and figure out these different creative strategies until a decade into my real estate investing career, which is never a good thing to not understand all the different levers you can pull to be advantageous in this business. So, um, I would just say to your audience, there when there's a will, there's a way, right? And to
Yes.
your point on like a sacrifice you have to give, um, we were around a very spending lifestyle in terms of we were around a lot of folks, my husband's teammates who are making, great sign-on bonuses and great money, and they were spending it all. And what's interesting is a friend of mine, her husband was on the NHLPA, so the union essentially for the players. And she had told me at the time that the league had identified that 74%, if I remember correctly, of uh, ex NHL players got divorced due to finances, change in finance. And that's not even counting separation. That's just divorce, actual
Right.
divorce. So, my husband and I knew at a very early time in our relationship that we didn't want that to happen. And we made a conscious decision that we wanted to build up our real estate portfolio so that my husband, when he wanted to retire, it was on his terms. It wasn't because he didn't get an offer. It wasn't because he was injured. It was because he actually wanted to retire. He was ready to retire. And that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of that we accomplished in our life is my husband, when he retired, he had, I don't even remember, I think it was like 6 or 7 different job offers that year to continue playing, but he didn't want to do it anymore. And we had built up a real estate portfolio that replaced his income. And I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that we were able to accomplish that, but we had to sacrifice a lot of things. We are around a lot of people, and you might say, "Oh, like, I'm sure the naysayers are like, oh, boo-hoo, like, these people are buying luxury cars. She's not buying luxury cars." It's very hard to be around an audience, whether it's luxury car or it's, a used, no-name brand car, whatever. It's very hard to be around any group of people where you are not doing what everyone else in that group is doing, whether it's going out to meals all the time, whether it's traveling, whether your kids are in private school or not, whether your kids do different sports activities or not. It is hard
Mm.
to be an outsider no matter what. So for us, when we were, only going, to travel one time a year because we spent time, both of our families are living in two different countries. So we have to go back and forth, and that costs money too. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you have to sacrifice along the way to be able to use your own money to invest, or I still have to manage a lot of these things, and that takes time. So when we lived in Europe, it wasn't like a lot of the wives and girlfriends traveled all throughout Europe. I kind of regret that I didn't do that, but at the same time, if I had done that, our businesses wouldn't be where they are today. I stay home and worked. So it's a different trade-off. And it's not, better or worse. It's a decision we decided to make. And but that's my ultimate goal was whenever our kids needed us, whether it's a school play, whether it's volunteering for the kids' classroom, whether it's they're sick and they just need a a parent to cuddle with all day. I didn't want to have to say, "I can't do it today because I have this big blah blah blah." At
Right.
any point in my schedule, I can cancel everything to be there for my family, and that is the number one reason that my husband and I have made all these sacrifices.
And you I feel like we can just end the podcast right now. And you just, I mean, you said it so beautifully. And I have been saying this for a very long time. And I literally have people look at me like, what are you talking about? There's no way my son can buy a house, or there's no way, when are they going to get ahead? It's all about the sacrifice. And you lived it, and you were in a world where you were very could have been very influenced to do other things, and you stuck to what your plan was and what you believed in and your end goal, which I think is so important because, like my son said at 29, he goes, "Mom, it's all about what what do I want, and, you know, what's more important? Is it going out every weekend? Is it, going out to lunch?" I see him bring his lunch to the office, and all those things add up. We just had a conversation at our staff meeting about, okay, January is enrollment time for our simple IRA program.
Mhm.
We do a company match. Probably 80% of my staff does not contribute to that. Why? Like,
Yeah.
why? And that's what we told them today. Why don't you do that? You are leaving money on the table. And our division manager did a wonderful example of, he had this cash in his hand and he was like, "Who wants free cash?" And everybody raised their hand. He goes, "Okay, too bad you're not going to get it. Here's why, because you haven't done this." And just like with real estate, and you also said something very important, the stock market is going to, speaking of stock market, it's going to ebb and flow. It's going to go up and down. It might crash for a little bit. It's going to build back up. Real estate, from my experience in North Carolina and the Charlotte area, is that we've seen a steady increase in our investments of about 10% per year. And um,
Incredible.
yeah, it's an incredible return for your money. Are people willing to be patient enough to wait? Because now, after investing for 20, 25 years, we are seeing the return on our investment. We have rental properties that are now paid off. We have a steady stream of income coming in. And that's that is a wonderful thing. I bought my first house before we got married, and I bought it for $55,000. It was just shy of 1,000 square feet. And of course, it's paid off now. And we still own it. We rent it out. And somebody said to me, "Oh, well, that was, in the 90s and things were better, and, 55,000." You know what? Actually, I did the math. I was a teacher in the 90s before we started our business. That salary today, back then, is the equivalent of whatever it is today. And doing the math and qualifications or, a mortgage, it really is about the same, but it's just all about what people are willing to do. Are you willing to go live in 1,000 square foot property
Yeah.
temporarily? Or are you trying to go live in a $500,000 property that's, ready to be lived in and doesn't need any TLC? If your expectation is that, then no, you're not gonna be able to afford a house.
I house hacked for everyone talks about, "Oh, you can't house hack with a boyfriend, you can't house hack with a fiance, you can't house hack with a husband, you can't house hack with a newborn, you can't house hack with kids, you can't house hack a down to the studs, full renovation." I house hacked, I think it was 12 years in a row. Through all of those, you can't dot, dot, dot. I think the number one thing to that, you know, probably is the best thing I've ever done in my life is to turn off mainstream news. I don't watch any mainstream news at all. I get all my information from the source. I look at Bureau of Labor Statistics. I look at the actual data and draw my own conclusions. I surround myself with experts, but I'm not listening to you can't afford a house, you can't because to me that's what you're saying is essentially by saying that, you're saying that no one in the entire country or in the area that you're looking in is distressed. There's always someone motivated to sell at a discount in any market. You have to find that, and you have to be willing to work for that. And then with respect to sacrifice, you talked about your son. When I started dating my husband, I was $38,000 in debt. 8,000 came from credit cards, 30,000 from student loans, and I did not have very good financial literacy. My husband taught me all of that. So, for example, one thing I didn't understand is I was paying off my lowest balance as opposed to my highest interest rate first and making minimum payments on everything else. He taught me that. So, I created a tracker, and every single week, I made extra payments on anything that had the highest balance. I targeted the highest balance first, then once I had that paid off, I went to the next highest balance, and I paid off all the minimums. He also taught me that even though I don't believe in the stock market, to do exactly what you just said, which is if your company matches, you just pay into the company match. If you don't, 'cause it's free money. It's free money. So, to your point, so all of those tricks, and by the way, just like your son, I packed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every single day for a little over a year while I paid off that $38,000. I lived at
I love
home.
you.
I did a trade-off with my parents, so I didn't, pay rent. I worked whatever they needed me to do around the house, so that was what I traded off for rent. I did not go out with my friends over the weekend. I didn't go to bars and all of those things. So, it's really a sacrifice that you have to make along the way, and if you're willing to make those sacrifices, then, it's great, but at the end of the day, what really dictates everything is we're coming around January 1st. What happens at January 1st every single year? People make New Year's resolutions. How many people are disciplined enough to stay on their New Year's resolutions? I don't know, probably less than 10% of people actually execute past January, and then past that. That's why gym memberships go up in January. Why is that important? So, anyone listening could be like, "Oh, well, that's me, then, I'm not gonna stay disciplined," or whatever. Let's flip the script. If you flip the script, you say to yourself, that means that 90% of my competition is gone after January. All these people with these big goals after January, they're not gonna be around in February. So now I have less competition if I stick with it. All I have to do is stick with it, and I become part of the minority. I separate myself. I'm now swimming in a blue ocean while everyone else continues to swim in a red ocean,
I
watches.
just wrote that down.
So it's so important that you can get really bogged down when you listen to all these headlines and negative spins, and all of these headlines and negative spins, our education system, everything, people are gonna say, "Oh, here she goes on conspiracy theory." It's not conspiracy theory, it is looking at the development of our systems. We need workers. We need people who do W-2 work. We need all of that. If we
Yeah,
create a society and we constantly promote entrepreneurs and trying new things and doing all these things, first of all, there's certain types of people who just don't fit the mold, who will never fall into that category. But even the people who do fit into the entrepreneurial category, we still as a society try to get them and fit them in this box as just saying, don't quit anything. Don't try to be a business owner. Don't create a business. Don't buy a business. And frankly, that just keeps everyone working. And when you look at the whole system, then there's no way to retire unless you do something differently. And this is just a mathematical equation. You know what I mean? Like,
right. It is, and you and I are both so passionate about it because, number 1, we, um, confirmed that you don't even need any money to start in real estate, and number 2, you just have to be disciplined, and those 2 things could create success for wealth and generational wealth. What better legacy to leave to your children than a place to live or an investment that provides housing for somebody else? And you also said something very important that your now husband taught you about the financial piece of it. What would you say to those that don't have somebody in their life who is knowledgeable about finances and or real estate? What could they do besides follow you and I for inspiration? But what could they do to start that path of, okay, in the new year, I'm just going to make it happen and I'm going to become a first time home buyer, or I'm going to make it my goal to start saving for, a potential investment property. What would you say to them?
You're not gonna like the answer, but it's you gotta change your circle. One of the hardest things I've had to do was leave
Love
friends behind, and, I like them. I think they're great people. Um, we're not aligned in what we want out of life, and that's okay. And what's interesting is so many people are so comfortable with the status quo, and they're comfortable with their friends, and they're comfortable drinking on the weekends and just going through the regular routine. And then everyone loves an underdog and cheers for an underdog. And once someone's highly successful, they start to, knock someone down. So you may have someone in your sphere where you're looking at, oh, they're going on all these vacations, or oh, they're traveling these different conferences. I
Mhm.
wonder if that's the real story or whatever. And you start to talk, self talk, and your self-talk is more a reflection of your insecurities than what is actually happening with that person, but you should
Right.
get around that person. You should get around what they are doing, go to conferences, join these free online communities, change your sphere. What you will realize is the friendships that you then almost like it fills in new slots, it opens up bandwidth for new friendships to take effect, those friends, you'll have a deeper friendship than you ever knew was possible. It's kinda like when you're in high school and you have your first love and you think this is the end all be all, and then you go through other people that you date, and then later you find truly the love of your life, and you kinda look back and say, "Oh, I could see why I really enjoyed those relationships, but I didn't know I could love someone this much." Or when you have kids, like, "I didn't know I could love to this level." It's the same thing. It's the same epiphany that happens. It's the same realization in the sense that it's like, I can't believe I can be so aligned with a person. I can't believe that they cheerlead for me. I can't believe that I feel comfortable telling them mm, like how, awful something's going on in my business and I really need help and they're willing to stop everything and help me. I can't believe they send me cookies on a random Tuesday. Like there's a level that gets unlocked because you are so aligned and you want so much for that person to be successful and have their dreams come true that the friendships I thought growing up were, and they were to one level, but not it's not the same. When I just think there's a difference between having a group of entrepreneurial friends, and having friends who don't aspire for, um generational wealth or not having financial stress in your life and constraints. There's a different way of thinking. I always say that when you partner, you should never partner with someone who is not in a similar financial position than you are, because when you go to make decisions, you make decisions differently, whether or
I
not
agree.
that decision is going to affect whether you have food on the table, right? So, like I always say, I never say anything negative about someone who steals. Now, I don't think it's right, but I'm not gonna knock them because, if they're stealing for their child to have food, if I was in their position, I'd probably do the exact same thing, to be honest with you. But at the same time, when you're partners with someone, you want to be in the same financial position so that it already takes away that potential cause for conflicts. The same is true for friendships, in my opinion. So I would say, going back to your question, If you wanna dramatically start to change things, you gotta get in the room. You gotta be on those I mean, the greatest thing about technology is now you can attend a conference or an online event any time of day, any day of the week. That's what COVID did. It was an accelerator for technology and online events. So leverage that. Leverage people's experience and, lead with values so you can foster those friendships.
Right, right, and learn from them. And you, um, you also wrote a book, The Only Woman in the Room, and I love the title, and it just came out a few years ago. Did you did you feel so passionately like I did about certain things in my life that you just wanted to get it down on paper and say these things that you're telling me right now and put that in the book? How did that all come to fruition?
So I have kinda always been the only woman in the room, and I've never realized that. So growing up, I played more individual sports, my brother played team sports, so we were always around his guy friends, and then I went to an all-boys high school, I played on an all-boys ice hockey team, I went to college and I lived with 13 other boys, and I never really realized it, to be honest with you, it really never it never dawned on me. My mom worked in an auto body shop, so there was 2 other women in the entire company, and then there was 30 plus men that worked there, so it just felt comfortable. It's always felt comfortable for me to be in a room of men than women. I honestly feel more uncomfortable around women than men.
I've said the same thing. Yes. Uh-huh.
It's very different, I went to a conference with my husband and the founders of the real estate investor community, Andressa Gadelli and Liz Faircloth, were in attendance, and they asked all women at the event to have lunch together. So they put together just 2 tables out of 450 people in attendance, and 16 of us sat at this table. And while everyone was talking and getting to know each other, I looked around the room and it was like a light bulb went off. I was like, what is going on here? How are there so many men in this room and there are no women? I never realized that real estate was such a men's game. And I went home that night, and in the car ride home, I said to my husband, I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called The Only Woman in the Room. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I need to write this book. I don't know why. It just like came over me like a wave. And for the next little while, I thought about, like, why do I wanna write this? And one of the reasons I wanted to write it was because at every event I had ever attended, there had been no woman keynote. Every woman that was ever on stage was on a panel or on a side stage when there were dueling stages going on, but every keynote had a book to their name. So I said, "Okay, if I provide a platform where women's voices can be heard through this book, then this will help all these other women get on stage." So over the next year, I didn't tell women I was doing this, but I secretively interviewed 19 other women and I asked them their story, and I wanted to make sure they weren't motivated by a book to be transparent with me. I wanted to see if they were naturally giving with information because I knew that they would start to get a following, and if they weren't willing to share the secret sauce, it would work against us as women. So it was really important to me that all these women be really giving with their information. I identified 19 women and I asked them to co-author the book. And they all willingly agreed. And also wanted to make sure that any person who picked up the book could relate to at least one person. So the irony of the book is I think there's 2 mentions throughout the entire book of being the only woman, but everything else is just about their story, how they run their business, and the other ironic part about the book is the most amount of compliments I receive on the book and the most, profound compliments about the book are from men. Men are
Uh-huh,
like,
nice.
"This is the
Yeah.
best real estate book." It's literally like the secret sauce behind how to do these different businesses. I can't believe how willing people are to share how they're doing, their business. So I've been really grateful for the women who wanted to go on this journey, and then, just people being open to reading it, men and women together.
That's amazing because I have found also that people that are successful and that have worked their way to the top, they usually are very open and willing to share their story because we all have one. And, you can be a leader from wherever you are. You don't necessarily have to be at the top. You can be in the middle, working your way up. And, when you surround yourself with great people that want to share and are willing to learn from their mistakes and admit their mistakes and tell you how to do it better, what what better recipe is that for success? And I'm so glad that you found so many that were willing. That's awesome. I can't wait to read it. Can't wait to read
Oh,
it. Um, Tell me how you have all of these things going on in real estate and you've incorporated some great businesses and you have a family, and how do you keep it all together?
um, this is actually, I think something that, I've kind of struggled to figure out, like, the best answer. I know what the answer is, but I didn't know how to articulate it. But earlier this week, I saw a quote, and I think it captures it perfectly, which is something to the effect of, "Your skills make you your first 100, your system makes you your first 100,000, your teams make you your first million." And it's the teams, it's the people, and, one thing that I think that people who are very successful, they have a couple things in common, most notably consistency, which we've already covered
Mm.
by staying disciplined, right? And then the second component is they're surrounded by great people.
Right.
And when you get really good people, so you have to focus on hiring really well and constantly tweaking your hiring. I think I've gotten really, really good at hiring.
Wonder
Um, my system of hiring now only takes me about 15 minutes. I know that seems crazy, but, I can really figure it out by just looking at a few key metrics and then how people answer certain questions that, that really kind of has catapulted all of these businesses.
Mhm.
So,
I agree to that. The people. The
people
people make
are
the product.
different. Yep.
And for a parent that might be listening or watching, and your children are young, so what are you doing now and what will you do in the future that you will instill the leadership qualities, the financial piece of it to your children that they too will grow up and know the value of dollar and um can benefit from the success that you've already created. So what are you instilling to them?
Um For financial literacy, we constantly talk about financial literacy. We have a money book that I read a page to them every single day. I also constantly test them. So, for example, they'll say, "Oh, mom, can I have a piece of candy?" And I'll say, "Well, you can have a piece of candy now, or you can invest that piece of candy and you can't have it today. But if you don't have it today, then you can have a piece of candy for the next 3 days." So, I'm trying to, like, instill this, delayed gratification,
Yes. Yes,
because we
that's
have
great.
such a need for, constant gratification, instant gratification, not constant, instant gratification.
Yeah.
So, trying to instill just different ways. I mean, there's ways that you can do financial literacy without it being, like, a lecture and boring, just trying to
Yeah.
make it creative. What's interesting is last week, my oldest daughter and I were home together while my husband and my youngest daughter were out. And my oldest daughter went downstairs, grabbed cash flow, the rat race game or whatever from Robert Kiyosaki and brought it upstairs and said, "Hey, can we play this game?" She has all these different games. I was shocked that she picked that game. We played it one time when she was a little bit younger, and I don't think she got the concept of it, but she loved it this time. And I think it's from all those little nuances that we just do. So I think you have to meet your child where they're at developmentally when it comes to financial literacy and grow with them. You don't wait till they're older and just throw it at them. It's almost like waiting till they're older to teach about nutrition or waiting till they're older to
Right.
teach about any aspect of life. I mean, there are elements you can teach along the way at any age, so that's really important. I also think if you're, in a situation where you have a spouse, and aren't a single parent, hats off to single parents, first of all, like, I don't know how you do it, but,
Right.
if you are in a situation where you have a spouse, I think being on the same page with a spouse is hands down the most important thing, like, starting at ground zero, you have to be on the same page with your spouse. If you're financially responsible and your spouse is spend, 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 this is never gonna work. I'm just gonna fast forward play and tell you what the outcome is. It's not gonna work. So, you really need to be on the same page. Um so I can't thank my spouse enough. So my spouse is a ex-professional athlete, and, he is what everyone would consider, "Oh, he must be the bread maker. He, is all of this and everything, and what people can't get over when they meet us is how completely opposite the dynamic is. So,
Yeah.
he is such a supporter for me being the front person for me, he's my biggest champion, and our girls, they don't know otherwise. They think women are the be all end all. It's complete opposite from what I grew up in. I grew up in
Yeah.
this environment where, it was like men, everything revolved around like the father and everything. And it's a complete opposite in our household. It's just because I remembered this story the other day that I'll share this. But my one girlfriend who, she's my best friend, been best friends with her my entire life. She brought this up to me the other day, because our daughters are of similar age, and when my daughters were 4 and 2, and her daughter was 3, um, we went out for the day to an event, and I said, "Oh, yeah, Kyle will watch your daughter," and she was like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, he'll watch it, won't be, no problem." She's like, "My husband would never watch 3 girls." And not only did that happen, but her daughter had a blowout while my husband was watching, and he had to take care of that and everything. And she's like, "I can't believe not only did your husband be like, 'Hey, yeah, go out. Yeah, I'll watch her, no problem,' whatever." It's just, kinda being okay with understanding that, we don't live in this society anymore where the dynamics are that a man can be the only provider or
Right.
is capable of being the only provider. So,
Yes.
I think that culture matters too. Um, and it's not only about raising girls in that atmosphere, but it's about raising men too. Because the reality of the situation, if we want to talk about why this actually matters and put numbers to it, is pre-COVID, women were outliving men 6 to 8 years on average. And over that period of time, it was costing between 286,000 and 316,000 for cost of living. That burden falls on everyone. So if you
Right.
have a mother, a grandmother, who's gonna cover their financial expenses? It's not just gonna go down the maternal line. It's not just gonna fall on women, it's gonna fall on men too. So we all need to be proponents for equal pay and equal opportunity and equal support to get people opportunities, financial literacy, so we're not struggling, nor is a burden put on anyone because everyone will have had the financial knowledge and the exposure to put themselves in situations to lead fruitful lives.
That's right. And I was reminded um, with an organization that I volunteer with, and you said it too. Somebody has to tell people and educate people. So there's that piece of it. And then, you know, we can't let our circumstances define us and therefore make excuses for what we can or cannot do and whatever those circumstances are. And then we have to be in it together, like you said, to help one another and, those that are less fortunate or those that perhaps want the tools and the keys to change and start that process of generational wealth. And you and I both think that it's real estate. And Ashley, it has truly been a pleasure to spend time with you today. We I could talk to you all day. We have so many other things that we could talk about. And I hope that perhaps you'll come back and we can continue the conversation. And you definitely have given us keys to change today. And I hope that when people will watch or listen, that they, in particular women, will be more inspired to take that leap and invest in real estate and start small. Might be a first time home owner that you and I can inspire to purchase that home and then want to do it again. So thank you so much. And I wish the best for you and your family.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
This has been Keys to Change with Shelly Henderson. Remember, it's never too late to unlock your real estate potential. To discover more inspiring stories and invaluable resources, visit us at shellylhenderson.com. Your journey to a thriving real estate investment starts here.